Annalene, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Hi there. Can everybody hear me?
We can hear you. Yes.
Morning.
Annalene,
Hi there.
we're just going to do a small introduction,
Thank you.
and then we're going to hand over to you for the presentation. Good morning.
Thank you so much.
Hope you're all well. Thank you for joining the recipe seminar that we've arranged, or webinar that we've arranged today. So we've got our colleagues from head office here in the boardroom, and we've got colleagues from our regional office that have joined us. And we're looking forward to this webinar today, Annalene. Colleagues, the webinar is inclusive of quite a few topics, including budgets, how to handle your personal budget, credit scores, family responsibilities in terms of how you need to assist your family with money, and how to then, if you need help, that's a burning question. We also touch on the topics today of good debt versus bad debt, and how to put that together and align it with your budget. But that said, welcome, and I'm sure this is going to be very informative, and in the end also, that rescue is an accredited service provider of Uasa, so feel free and comfortable to utilize their services if necessary, if you do need help. So that is not always a bad thing. It can sometimes be a good thing, but you need to manage it according to your budget and finances. With that, well, if you would like to say a few words, but thank you so much. We then hand over to Annalene. Annalene is with debt rescue, but I'm going to allow her to introduce herself. Very well qualified and willing and able to assist any of our colleagues that need assistance. Annalene, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And good morning, everybody, and thank you. I know most of us are probably looking towards Fake Friday tomorrow and just wanting this long weekend. So I appreciate you joining on a topic that most of us don't always want to discuss, but I hope you'll find it informative. As mentioned, I'm from Debt Rescue. I'm a registered debt counselor. I have been since 2008. And we assist over-indebted consumers who are struggling with their finances. And based on our 16 years of experience, we've, since the inception of the National Credit Act, we've seen the opportunity that there is a lot of, wellness education we'd like to contribute to, giving tips and tricks, etc. So I hope you find this interesting. I'm not going to try and bore you with how to create a budget, but rather looking for opportunities on where we can save money, how we can be smarter with our money, etc. So if you don't mind, I'm going to switch off my screen because I'm a very handsy person, so I might distract you. And then I am going to share my presentation with you. May I kindly ask if we can enable a share screen for me? Thank you. Thank you. It's there. Thank you. Okay. May I kindly confirm if you can see my screen?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. So I'm going to start by setting the scene. And the reason I usually do this is just to remind all of us that what many of us are facing financially is that we are not alone. A lot of times debt has become, and personal finances has always been a taboo in terms of what we discuss. We don't tell people if we're struggling. We rather try and keep up appearances and the likes, and potentially also end up in a situation where we end up in a more difficult financial situation because of the fact that we do not share. And there's obviously merit that we don't want to overshare, but I think just to give comfort, I want to start with statistics. if we look at South African debt in numbers, there's approximately 25 million of the last count, I think we're now 62 million South Africans who are credit active. And of that, almost 40% have impaired credit records. Now, what that means is that at least one of their accounts is 3 months or more in arrears. So looking at that, yeah, that's roughly 10 million people. But that means out of, if you look at your general group of people that you engage with who are most likely credit active, between 1 in 2 and 1 in 3 are struggling financially and are missing payments. And this is sort of where I wanted to say, we are not alone. And a lot of the factors that are leading to us having to reorganize how we pay our debts and so forth is completely beyond our control. COVID has thrown us, I mean, South Africans were struggling financially before that, but COVID and all the subsequent effects of that, and obviously load shedding and various economic factors, has affected us and our budgets very, very negatively. And the stats are proving this. These are official stats that come from the National Credit Regulator, that are provided to them by the credit bureaus, which comes from the credit providers at the end of the day. So this paints a very, very real picture. And I think it should give, I guess, to a degree, comfort to us to know that we are not alone in what we are facing. At Debt Rescue, because of what we do, we focus a lot on research. We try and get an understanding of what is contributing factors, what are consumers really facing out there. So we do a large amount of surveys and really try to get to the bottom of, we know how we feel and we know what affects us, but we'd like to know, what are other consumers experiencing? So from our surveys that we've done, 68% have told us that they don't have money left at the end of the month. Now, what I'm referring to here is not by the time you get your next paycheck. I mean, if you get paid on the 25th, by the 30th, 68% do not have any money left in their bank account. When we published these results from our survey last year, 3 months later, the Turquoise Bank affirmed that they are seeing the exact same in their client base, that literally as consumers are paying the most necessary bills, the most necessary debt, they're left with nothing left in their bank accounts, and they still have possibly 25 days until the next paycheck, which means that how are they making it? How are they buying food? Your day-to-day food, your fuel, your transport, things like that. And we know what we are seeing is consumers are turning to forms of credit to actually finance their living expenses, buying food on credit, buying petrol on credit, that kind of thing. So this is obviously very real. And like I say, this has been reaffirmed that this is truly what is happening out there. 49% of our participants told us that their groceries don't feed their family anymore, meaning that what I spent a year ago or 6 months ago on my groceries, if I had to use that same amount, I cannot buy. And we obviously know that because inflation is eroding the value of what we can buy, which means that in essence, either I am making lifestyle choices, which you will see we've got stats on as well, or not just lifestyle choices, but actual budgetary food buying choices, or we're incurring again debt to make sure that we're feeding our families. 81% have told us salaries are not keeping up with increases. This has been reaffirmed by multiple statistics being done by multiple research companies as well. And we understand the reason. I mean, post-COVID, most of us are just so thankful that we still have employment because so many businesses were affected. So many people have no longer got employment, etc. I mean, we're sitting with one of the highest unemployment rates in the world at just over 32%. But realistically speaking, we also know that the cost of living crisis we are living with has made our budget or placed our budget under enormous strain, meaning that inflation is eroding our income, and therefore we can't keep up anymore. Some scary statistics that we got when we were doing a lifestyle survey. 25% of our participants told us that they'd cut down on meat and replaced it with other ingredients to try and save costs. And obviously, we know that if you follow a full vegetarian diet, we know that obviously it can be done and it's nutritious. But if you are not used to cooking that way or whatever, what is happening in a lot of these cases is that these meats are being replaced, for example, with cheap carbs, etc., to fill up the meal. And then we know that could have side effects. But more worrying is 81% told us that they've cut down on meals due to affordability. So this means they are potentially skipping breakfast or they are skipping lunch, hopefully not skipping dinner, but they're actually taking that step to change their eating habits and cut down on a meal. Now that I find incredibly, incredibly concerning, to think that people are taking those kind of desperate measures because they can't afford it. And then 60% have told us they'll buy on credit if items are on special. Now, this is one we did around the festive season and Black Friday, sales season, where we asked consumers, if a special is good enough, would you consider buying on credit? Because obviously credit comes with its own interests, and that it might erode into the savings that you are having if you can't pay it immediately, etc. But what was really interesting was that consumers have changed the habit of maybe 5 years ago, where big ticket items would be what they were buying their specials on. They've actually turned to groceries and household goods. We know that with the Black Friday specials and festive season specials even, are now putting groceries, household daily use items as part of that. And people are, if the special is good enough, will be prepared to buy those items on credit, to try and save at the end of the day. So after we've looked at the statistics, obviously, we know we need to have to go back to that horrible B word, and that's called a budget. And it's something that a lot of us are not, we don't do it frequently. We might not do it at all, and we might not know why we want to do it. But this is the only way that you can know what your personal financial situation is. If you want to know, where am I? Do I need to make changes? Can I achieve goals I set myself? I need to have a budget. And what this in essence means is I need to very simply look at my income and deductions. In other words, after that, what is my take-home pay? What are my living expenses? And what are my debt obligations? Simplifying it to the absolute core. And I'll show you an example of that now. But why do I need it? Well, this is your opportunity to achieve your financial goals. And this could be anything from getting out of debt that you might have too much of, or you might be wanting to save to buy a car or a house, or you might be planning to send your child to university, anything to that effect. You do not know what you can save if you do not know what's going on in your personal finances. And this is where you need to see that this is actually an opportunity, but also remembering that a budget is not a static document. You don't create it once and then it stays in place for the next 6 or 12 months. Inflation means food costs more. You have to go and revisit it. You have to go back and say, okay, well, I budgeted X for food, but food actually cost me more or less. I need to make some changes here, etc. But we can only find these opportunities when we are taking these steps to actively know what is going on. And this is also a truth moment. This is a moment where we have to be true to ourselves when we go and we say, listen, this is a me, myself, and I conversation. What am I doing? What are my habits? Where are my opportunities? So what does a budget look like? In its simplest form, I usually say break it into 3. First, you have your income. List your income that is guaranteed. Now, a lot of us have taken on side hustles, to try and supplement our income. And this could be anything from buying and selling things, making things, baking things, all that kind of stuff. But when you are working out your budget, and obviously, guys, when we talk side hustles, I have to put a disclaimer. Obviously, if you have any side hustles or you're thinking of them, please, it cannot be in contravention with your employment contract, and it cannot be in competition with your employer, etc. So I'm talking about using your skills where perhaps you're a brilliant photographer and you can take wedding photos or something to that effect. But when you put this into your budget, only put it in if you can guarantee it. In other words, if you might make 1,000 Rand 1 month and then for 6 months nothing and then another 1,000 Rand, do not put that 1,000 Rand into your budget, because it's not going to be there every month, and it means your budget's not going to balance out at the end of the day. So your forms of income is obviously your salary. If maybe you get overtime or you get a commission structure, then get an average of what your true figure is, but don't put in your maximum. Again, might fall short. If you get financial support, maybe in some form, and it's regular, you keep that in. And then, like I said, your side hustles. When it comes to expenses, this is not debt. This is the stuff you need to live every month. So this would be your food, your rent, your transport, your school fees, insurance, cell phone, etc. And you also see that this is going to be the area where we have the best opportunity of potentially, making some changes. And what you do there is obviously you total your income, you total your expenses, and you deduct your expenses from your income. What is left needs to cover the minimum debt repayments. Now, your debt repayments is home loan, vehicles, credit cards, store cards, personal loans, overdrafts, etc. And if you say income, very simply put, and I'm a visual person, income is 10,000, expenses are 7,000, and debt is 2,300. That means I can save 700 Rand. But if, for example, I sit with a case where my expenses are 9,000 Rand, I'm going to be sitting with negative savings, meaning I'm actually potentially in financial trouble. But once I have this picture, I now have an action plan. I have somewhere I can start. I know where I can move to. Part of your budget needs to include family financial commitments if you have made this. Now, obviously, family financial commitments can take on various forms. Some of us are the sandwich generation, where we are taking not only care of our children, but also of our elderly parents who might require financial assistance. And if we have made these commitments, we need to factor that into our budget under the expense section. And it's important, obviously, to take care of your loved ones. You might be taking care of a brother or a sister who lost employment, and you're financially supporting them, etc. But remembering that there's no value in you placing yourself in a financial position where you're supporting somebody else, but putting yourself in a negative position. So include this as part of your budget and see what impact it has. And unfortunately, sometimes this might lead to hard discussions where you have to go back to the family and you say to them, listen, I know I've been supporting you in this way, but if I carry on in this manner, I'm putting my own family at risk that we are going to end up in a debt spiral to support you. Rather that than what you sit in a debt spiral because you are trying to support somebody else, which you cannot do. But like I say, this is one of those things where it's an opportunity to see, can you afford it? What can you afford? Perhaps you can still stick to the amount by making other changes, but it needs to form part of your budget. Now, as I said, it can take different forms. This could be anything from the elderly parents, unemployed family members, as well as black tax. Now, Investec defines black tax as financial support that a professional entrepreneur of color is obliged to provide to their family on a continuous basis outside of their living expenses as a form of payback for sacrifices made. This falls under family financial commitments. So irrespective of what form it takes, make sure it forms part of your budget and that you can afford to make this. And if not, that you either make changes to your lifestyle if you still can, or alternatively have that conversation to say, I cannot afford what I committed to originally because it's placing me in dire straits. But this is what I can truthfully afford. So I've now explained quite extensively how you work that into your budget. Part of your budget, and this includes expenses as well as debt, involves understanding the difference between wants and needs. Needs are the things you cannot live without. Wants are the things that make life more comfortable. Now, I have a teenager, and she believes everything is a need. And I have to frequently bring up this little picture, and I go, babe, those Nike Air Force something or another's that I can't even remember the brand name, they do not fall under needs, they fall under wants. But by differentiating between this also helps us prioritize. Like I say, whether it is a question of things that I might want to buy cash and put in my expenses, or whether I might be incurring debt for that. Needs is things like housing, transport, food, electricity, schooling, medical. Wants is the nice stuff: entertainment, travel, designer clothing, takeouts, tech. And like I say, if you look at it from an expense perspective, when it comes to wants, this could be expense or it could be debt, because I might want a nicer new car, but can I afford the nicer new car? No, I can't. Therefore, it's not. It's actually it's a want. It's not a need. It doesn't fit into my budget. We always prioritize needs above wants. So now we've done this whole little exercise and we've got our budget, and we now understand what our income is, what our expenses are, and what our debt obligations are. The first place to look for opportunities to make changes in your budget starts with your expenses. You've now had a look, you see what you spend on electricity, what you spend on transport, what you maybe spend on takeouts, etc., and see where can I make some changes? Are changes possible, etc.? I like to start with electricity, because electricity, as we know, when we have, is very expensive. And the first place to start when it comes with electricity is your geyser. If you are still, if you still have a conventional geyser, which I think the vast majority of us tend to still have, your geyser takes up roughly between 40 and 60% of your electricity spend per month. So the first thing I'd say is check your thermostat. Your thermostat is generally set to the maximum of 60 degrees. We cannot shower in 60-degree water, which means we are diluting that water and adding cold water, etc. And we're reheating water up to a maximum that we do not need. And every degree it goes up is electricity it's being used. So perhaps, bring it down to 50. See if that's comfortable. Find that medium, but the less work that geyser has to do, the less electricity is being spent. And while we're on the topic of geysers, two things I'd like to add in here is, firstly, look at putting a timer on it. They're cheap. They're pretty cheap items. You can buy them at the hardware store. You do need an electrician to obviously install it, but it's not an expensive exercise. But what's beautiful about putting in these timers is you determine when it goes on and off, and especially as we head into the winter season. Now, I know there's a lot of debate around, but it takes more electricity to heat it up, etc. Right now, it's no different to us sitting in load shedding and exactly the same happening. The only difference being you can control it, and it definitely doesn't take more electricity. So here, for example, I would say I do not need 60-degree water at 3 a.m. None of us are awake. Well, I'm not awake. So why would I need water then? But I shower at 5, and I know my geyser takes approximately 45 minutes to heat up. So I set it to go off to go on at 4, and then I switch it off again at 6, because by then all of us have left the house. We only come back home about 5 in the evening. So kids need to bath, etc. I set it to go on and off in my peak areas where I need it. But I don't want boiling hot water at 1 p.m. There's nobody at the house. Why must my geyser, especially in winter when the ambient temperature drops, keep heating up? So I really see the value in a timer. I have one. I've had one for quite a few years, and I must say it's made a massive difference in my personal budget. And then the next one that I'd like to recommend on geysers is putting on a geyser blanket. Again, you can buy them at the hardware stores. You get proper geyser blankets. They're not expensive items. And wrap your geyser with this. Obviously buy the right, not any blanket, a proper geyser blanket. You can buy them at the hardware store. What this does is, as we head into winter again, the ambient temperature drops quite dramatically, which means that the outside air is making the water in the geyser go cool, which means the geyser is kicking in, etc. So really nice opportunities there, not very expensive, and definite benefits. The other ones are smaller ones, and here again, point 2 and 3, I speak from personal experience. Switching on lights when leaving a room, and don't let the TV play when no one is around. So I have a teenager. She walks into the lounge, she switches the TV on, her phone rings, she walks out, and 2 hours later, the TV is still playing, especially when the kids are on holiday. The TV is still playing, nobody's there, the lights are on, and quite literally nobody's home. And we're paying electricity. Every little bit counts. So teaching habits and ourselves instilling habits. If I'm not in the room, switch the light off, switch the television off if nobody's watching it. Replacing light bulbs with energy efficient ones. This one, I think, has probably become the one that has been really, since load shedding kicked in, those who've bought inverters or have gone solar have really seen the benefit of this. The difference between a conventional light bulb and an energy efficient one, and the impact on how much electricity it draws is significant. When you visually see the difference on your display, where I switch the light on, I switch the light off, I switch the energy efficient one on and off, it's real. So really worth investing in them. They're a little bit more expensive, but they do last significantly longer. So definitely worth, even you don't have to do it all at once, but gradually start converting your globes, your light bulbs to energy efficient ones. And then repairing leaking pipes, that's an obvious one. Firstly, we're in a water scarce country, and we need to obviously save water as much as possible. But if it's a hot water pipe that's leaking, again, you've got hot water going out, cold water coming in, and we repeat the cycle of unnecessary heating up water. Not my favorite one, taking shorter showers. I love showers, especially in winter, because it's the only way I heat up. But realistically, the longer I shower, the more hot water I'm using. And again, the cycle repeats itself. And then the last one is, this might not add up a lot, but it does make a difference. And that is unplugging unused electrical equipment. If you use the air fryer once a week, but it's plugged in the whole time and its little light is on, it's drawing some form of electricity. So unplug the items that you do not use often. do not let all the lights shine, because if the light is shining, it is drawing, whether it's a minute amount. At the end of the day, again, we can save by switching them off. I absolutely love this one, shopping for cheaper insurance. If you switch on your television in prime time in the evening, you are inundated with every insurer advertising in that time. And I love it, because I believe insurance should be reviewed at least once per annum. The reason for that is there's a lot of competition out there. Obviously, do your homework, go read the Hello Peter reviews, go and read, more, as much as you possibly can if you're considering switching. But there is a lot of opportunity to save money in insurance, because generally we take out insurance and then sort of almost forget about it and go, I know I have the insurance, it's 3 years down the line, and I still have items on there that I, for example, don't own, or I've replaced them, etc. Get competitive quotes. Compare apples with apples. Really, really important to do that. In other words, don't tell the one you've got 3 cell phones and the other one nothing. You're not comparing apples with apples. But get comparative quotes. You'll be surprised the amount of money you could save there. Check the value of the items that you're insuring. Don't be over or underinsured. Overinsured meaning that you're paying for things you do not have. You'll never be able to claim for it either. So if you say you have 200,000 rands content insured, and they come and do an assessment in the event that you claim, and they turn around and they say, okay, but you actually only have 100,000 rand stuff. You've been paying for something that you cannot use, and they're not going to pay you out for. And in reverse, being underinsured, if you say I have 100,000 rand stuff, but you have 200,000, in the event that you have a total loss claim, for example, a fire or a flood, they're going to come in and say, but you don't have those things. So we only can pay you for what you actually have. So make sure that your insurance is accurate. This is a really important one, excess. Make sure you know what your excess is. Excess is the co-payment you make in the event that you have to claim. So very simple example, you're in a fender bender, your damage is 20,000 rand. If your excess is 5,000 rand, it means the first 5,000 rand has to be paid by you. The balance gets paid by your insurer. And you need to make sure that you understand that excess amount and make sure it's affordable. Understanding that when you are doing quotations, especially when you're doing comparisons, is make sure that you understand that you are comparing like for like excess as well, because generally how it works is the lower excess you pay, the higher the premium, and vice versa, higher excess, lower premium. So that when you are shopping around and they come back with a significantly cheaper quote, make sure that the excess is like for like, because generally they can bring the quote down, but then make you pay a lot more. Can you afford that more? Make sure that you are comfortable with that excess amount in the event that you need to claim. To claim. And then lastly, obviously, remove items you no longer own. You might have bought a camera 6 years ago and you've sold it since and you don't even own it, but you're still paying the premium for that thing. Or cell phones, you gave it to your mom. You don't have it anymore, it's 3 years down the line, but you're still paying premium. And especially when it comes to tech, we know those are probably the highest cost items on our expenses. So insurance, very nice opportunity for potential savings. Grocery shopping with a list. So this to me is a nice one that I've implemented for myself, and I found it works really, really well. Is I generally shop once a week. Saturday is my shopping day. And before I go shopping, I make a list. I check the cupboards. I'm sure most of you are probably similar to me. I have certain places in my cupboard where certain things stand. The cereal stands here, the pasta stands there, the sugar is there, the coffee is there. So when I open the cupboard, I can generally see, okay, wait, there's no tomato sauce, or the peanut butter is almost done, or whatever. So you check your cupboards before you leave the house and before you go shopping. Make your list. Once you have done that, okay, go check your community papers. Every week we get that little, well, actually, no, it's not that little anymore, that really thick newspaper that is jam-packed with everybody's special. Lay them out on the table once you have your list. And now you are starting to compare, and you say, okay, I need dishwashing liquid. Who's got the best special? And then you start allocating and saying, okay, I'm going to this store for that store for that store for that, because I'm going to save. But obviously try and keep them all in one place. So pick a mall or an area where they're not far apart, because you don't want to lose your savings in transport costs. Don't buy items you don't use just because they're on special. Now, here my favorite example is coffee. There's nothing nicer than seeing these ads for these really expensive coffees come up, and it's like, oh, they're on special. but I never buy that coffee because it's not in my budget. And even on special, it's still not in my budget. But hey, it's a huge saving, yes, but it's still a lot more than what I normally budget for. So be careful of buying items that you wouldn't normally buy. When it comes to this, I'd like to make it, a recommendation here. So all of the stores have apps now, as we all know. So Checkers has got 60/60, Pick and Pay's got ASAP. Spar has got, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, my apologies, but everybody has an app. I usually say use the app as your shopping basket. And what I mean by that is you don't have to go and buy online through them. But during the week, generally, is when things get depleted and you might not pick it up on Saturday morning. So Wednesday night, you're having dinner and you use the last tomato sauce. Put it into your virtual shopping bag immediately. If you get to the store, all you do is no matter where you shop, you open your app and you can go, what did I put in my basket so that I remember to buy it? Because there's nothing worse than standing in the store and you go, I can't remember if we have sugar. Now I've got two choices. I buy sugar, I get home, and guess what? I have two. Now I have three. Not the end of the world. Sugar's not going to go off. But hey, I looked at the price of sugar the other day. I nearly had a heart attack. That's 60 odd rand I could have used on something else that I have now bought an item that I didn't need. Or worse, I don't buy it. I get home and I don't have sugar, which means I have to drive back to the store. I'm wasting fuel, etc., etc. So use your little virtual apps. I use 60/60 purely because it's the only store that is close to where I live. So everything goes into my virtual basket. But if I go shopping, I go shop wherever, but I open my virtual bag, my virtual shopping basket. I do not write it on pieces of paper because the piece of paper is on the fridge. And by the time I'm standing in the store, it's still on the fridge. And I now cannot remember what I did. This way I have my shopping list with me at all times. Don't shop on an empty stomach. This is probably one of the worst things to do. You're driving home, hubby phones, wifey phones, listen, we need bread and milk. Can you quickly stop at the store? Now, of course, there's a couple of other people who are also standing in the store doing what you're doing. So you're standing in a queue, you realize you're hungry, you smell the bread, the croissants, you see a milkshake, before you know it, you've got 7 additional items you didn't go to the store for, but because you're hungry, you end up buying them. And then you get home and you go, okay, but we're making dinner and I've potentially just wasted all of this money on these things that I hadn't planned in my budget. So really, really try and avoid this. And I really recommend this with children as well. Being a mom, of course, that is when they will decide, I'm hungry now and I want food now. And it's like a whole scenario where you end up buying things again just to calm the situation. So don't shop on an empty stomach. Don't buy food on credit. If you ever have to buy food on credit because there is an incentive, maybe through your bank or through the store or whatever, if you use the card, and I'm not talking about the loyalty cards, I'm talking about the actual credit cards, please only do so if you have the intention of paying it back the moment you get home. In other words, that you're going to transfer that amount immediately into that card, because otherwise you are paying interest and you are going to be consuming goods that you haven't paid for yet. So really try and avoid this scenario. And if, like I say, you're doing it for loyalty purposes, then pay that immediately. And lastly, sticking to that list. When you get to the till and you're unpacking your trolley or your basket, as each item is being put on the counter, compare it to that list. And if items snuck in there has to obviously be a very good reason, because you didn't know it wasn't special and it is an item you use every day, or it's the kids that snuck in a chocolate bar, or who knows what else possibly. That's the only way we can control how our expenses work on groceries. Another one is loyalty cards. I love loyalty cards. I have everyone. I'm not talking about the credit cards, I'm talking about the store cards. But there is nothing more painful than walking around with a wallet with 30 different pieces of plastic, because heaven forbid I don't have my loyalty card and I can't claim my instant discount or my vouchers or my whatnots. Most of these stores have, well, firstly, loyalty cards, but they also have apps. So you can download the app and obviously load your card on there. All of them scan. I have tested this from Builders Warehouse to Spar to Clicks to Checkers. They all scan from the app. But even better, if like me, you have storage issues on your phone, I can't keep all the apps. I've downloaded this little app, what's called Stocard, Stocard. And all you do is it's one central point and you load all of your cards in there virtually. And when you get into the store, this thing is quite smart. It seems to know which store I'm in because it seems to have this the actual card almost ready for me. But you're standing in Clicks, the card is there. I tap on it, I give it to the cashier, and it scans it. That way, I am not losing out on my savings. I'm getting my benefits, etc. And that way, I'm also not carrying around a whole wad of plastic, because there's nothing I hate more than that. Obviously, look for items that are on special that you can get because of your loyalty cards. Again, Checkers has their extra savings. Clicks usually has 3 for 2. Obviously, when you do 3 for 2, take the price and divide it by 3 to see if you're still saving, etc. But make sure you are carrying your cards. And if the rewards come in the form of a voucher, make sure you use it before it expires. Some places will remind you. Clicks almost always tells you, ma'am, you've got a 22 Rand cashback. Would you like to use it? But there are some that don't. So just keep track of your loyalty so that you make sure that when they reach the expiration date, that you haven't lost out on it. A fun one is planting a garden, especially if you've got kids. I think this is really a nice thing. I use Checkers as a lot of my reference points because I do see a lot of innovation from them. And a couple of years ago, they had those little seedling thingies where if you bought your groceries, you'd get like those little growing seed things. And everybody at my office's kids were doing it. And then the seeds got to a certain point and they were like, okay, now, well, what are we going to do with this? And we started a community garden at the office. So we literally now have spinach and green peppers and tomatoes and all kinds of things growing here. It's our office garden. Whoever wants can go and take. But if you have space at home, seeds are very cheap. Seedlings a little bit more expensive, but seeds are very, very cheap. It's a lot of fun to grow this with the kids, watch them germinate, etc. And of course, the satisfaction for them when, I use kids as a reference, but I think this is applicable for everybody, is picking your spinach, your tomatoes and green peppers. I use those 3 because I do not have green fingers. I manage to grow these, and if I grow it, I believe anybody can. They're hardy, they're quick growers, and you can pretty much grow them through winter as well. But every time you are using these fresh things that you grew, it doesn't not just give you the satisfaction, it's a saving. We know how expensive fresh fruit and vegetables are. If you can grow any of them, I really encourage you to do so. And look at possibly starting community gardens. Perhaps you and some of your neighbors can go, listen, I'm going to be growing spinach, you grow tomatoes if you don't have enough space, or you want to be more experimental. I can't grow carrots. I've tried, it doesn't work, but that's me. And apparently potatoes are really super easy to grow. So there's another opportunity. But really look into this because it's quite satisfying, it's quite de-stressing, but it helps your budget, which is the most important part of everything. As part of your planning, when you do that budget at the beginning, you need to make provision for an emergency fund. Whether this is you saving for a rainy day or saving for something specific, you need to make sure that you are saving. And when you do so, I strongly recommend pay yourself first. And what I mean by this is have a separate bank account, and the moment your salary is paid, you know the amount you've provisioned, immediately transfer it out. Do not keep it in your normal day-to-day transactional account, because inevitably you might not be keeping track and you might end up spending it. So transfer it. There's a lot of banks currently where you can open no-cost or low-cost bank accounts. Transfer it into there and leave that bank card at home so that you can achieve your goals and not get tempted. But also in the event that you have a scenario, for example, your car suddenly needs, well, not suddenly, but your car needs tires, or you need new exhaust or something to that effect, that you do not have to go into credit to be able to fund this emergency, but rather than say, okay, well, that is what my rainy day fund is for this thing I hadn't planned for that has now happened, and I can use the funds that I'd set aside for that. And of course, if you want to use this as a savings tool, the same method would apply. But I do always caution, please be careful, especially when we head towards the end of the year with the festive season temptations, is that we do not use this for luxuries unless that's what you're saving for. So, for example, you are saving for a nice warm coat for winter, or you are perhaps saving for a nice pair of winter boots or something to that effect. Make sure that is when you use it, not because you're walking past and you see some fantastic special. If that's not what you were saving for, leave the card at home. That way you will not get tempted. Okay, so now we've made changes to our budget and we've done all of our saving, and we've now got a good idea of where we are. and we want to apply for credit. Now, I use the example of, say, for example, I want to now go and buy a vehicle. I've now set aside my amount for that I want to use as a deposit, etc. And I'm going to approach the credit provider. What happens when I get there? Well, everything starts with a credit report. Your credit report contains all the information of your credit history for at least the past 2 years. Now, on there, you'll have, for example, your it'll have all the accounts that you currently have with the different credit providers. It'll have the outstanding balance, the initial debt, your monthly installment, and then your payment history for the past 2 years. So it's a global overview. Understanding a credit bureau is just a repository of information. They get the information from the credit providers. So the information that they are showing on there is, in essence, information that was sent to them by the credit providers. You're entitled to one free credit report per annum, but there are places that give it to you more frequently and at no cost as well. I usually recommend, by law, you can get one free. Go Google free credit report. You'll see there's a ton of places that come up. Remembering, when it comes to your credit report, nobody can access that without your consent. You can only access it by answering some security questions. And this is just obviously to secure your information. And nobody, credit providers, cannot get your credit report without asking your consent first, because each time somebody draws your credit report, it does reflect that somebody did an inquiry. So, as I said, it shows your payment behavior. It will show if you've got legal action, etc. But the significance of your credit report comes into how much you can borrow, obviously based on your affordability, but most importantly, what interest you get charged. Because the higher your credit score, especially when it comes to asset purchases, you have the ability to negotiate, to say, I have a brilliant credit score. I'm going to try a couple of different finance houses because I want to see where I'm going to get the best interest rate. So the higher your credit score, the better your credit score, the better your negotiation power in terms of getting better interest rates. So perhaps you now look at your credit report and you go, gosh, okay, this isn't what I thought it was. I thought it might have been higher. How do I fix it, etc.? So first and foremost, check it for accuracy. Sometimes you'll find that information might be pulling through incorrectly. The very simple thing to do there is, if you can see that there's an account that shows you have an outstanding balance, but you know you paid it, you can lodge a dispute directly with the
Adeline, can you hear us?
She becomes more intermittent because talking starts going.
For the colleagues online, we're just trying to get the presenter back on. Thank you.
Okay. Can you guys hear me?
We're back. Yeah.
My apologies. Sorry, I lost the internet there. My sincere apologies. I'm just going to quickly share my screen. Okay, I'm sorry. Can I ask for permission to share my screen again, please? Thank you. So sorry about that. Okay, I'm not sure where you lost me. Can you see my screen? Not yet. Okay. We were talking about credit score. Did you hear any part of my conversation about improving credit score?
Yes, so
Okay.
we just started on the screen. We were going on the payments on time.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so in essence, when it comes to your credit reports, like I said, make your payments on time, and if you can, early. It's really important that you can show that you can afford the debt that you have. If you are paying late, it is going to affect your credit score because it looks like you might be in financial trouble. Try pay more than the minimum. If you are paying only the minimum continuously, again, it creates the impression that potentially you cannot afford anymore, hence potentially affecting your credit score. Don't apply for credit too often, because each time you apply, it looks like you're potentially overextending yourself because you're having to look into getting more debt because of possibly being in financial distress, and therefore it's going to affect your credit score. And something a lot of people do not realize is your credit contract cell phones, as well as your short-term insurance, also reflects on your credit report and also contributes to your credit score. So making sure that you do not miss your contract cell phones, not your prepaid, your contract cell phone payments, really important to make them on time, as well as your short-term insurance, because they do have an impact on your credit score. So how do you know if you're possibly over indebted? Well, the obvious signs over and above, obviously, what your budget might be telling you, is if you're having sleepless nights over debt, if collectors are calling you and you're having to start dodging these calls, if you're being threatened with legal action and repossession, etc. We know that inevitably this is going to impact your work because you're going to be distracted perhaps, etc. But it also affects both your physical and your mental health. COVID has taught us that physical and mental health, these two go hand in hand. Because if you start struggling with worry and anxiety, etc., eventually you're going to start feeling physically ill. So if any of these things are potentially symptoms you are experiencing, in essence, look at the opportunity of, are you possibly over indebted, and what are your possible solutions? But at the same time, I'm going to tell you, not all debt is bad debt. There are things that are worth buying and make sense buying on credit, and there are items that absolutely are not. Good debt is anything that, in the good old days, they used to tell us it's only property because it appreciates, and certain stocks and bonds and whatever it is. But the reality is, anything that you buy that by the time you have paid it off retains a significant amount of its value is something that you can buy on credit. Your car might not be, well, depending on what you buy, might not be worth what you paid for it, but you will still, if you've taken care of it, have significant asset value left in it. So a house, obviously, if you buy well and you maintain, etc., and by the time you've paid it off, then obviously you will see asset, you'll see growth in that asset. And let's be honest, how many people could possibly buy a house or a car cash? Almost nobody. So it makes sense. And also, these are generally the kinds of debt that, yes, you're paying them off over a significantly longer period of time, but they have the lower interest rates. So a good tip here is, if you are going to be purchasing a house or a car, try and pay more than the minimum here as well. You'd be surprised the impact that paying more on a bond installment, more than the minimum, has on your repayment term. So those are the good kinds of debt. Education, whether for yourself, whether for your children, this is definitely something worth investing in, and has return, because if it's for yourself, you increase your employment opportunities and your income ability, and the same for your children. So education, not a bad thing to look at getting debt for. So as long as it increases or at least keeps a decent portion of its value. Bad forms of debt is anything that reduces or has no value by the time it's paid off. This is where I say, for example, payday loans. Payday loans is that loan that I've now said 5 days after payday, you have no money, and by the time next month comes, you are sitting with having to pay back that loan with its interest, and you're starting the next month on the back foot because you're short that money already. Though that is bad kind of debt. That is really something that needs to be avoided. And unfortunately, I love tech, I really do, but buying tech on credit is really not a good idea. The reason for that is, you buy a cell phone today, 6 months from now, 3 new models have come out, and what you bought, you will not be able to get that same amount. Never mind if you've bought it on credit over 3 years, which I see is now seems to be the norm on cell phone contracts, you're not going to get back what you paid for it. So really not the best kind of thing to be buying on credit. And ladies and gentlemen, that is in a nutshell my recommendations and my tips and tricks on budgeting and financial wellness. Thank you so much. Do you have any questions?
No questions. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a few minutes. Christian, online, any questions? If you're online and you have any questions for Annelien, please.
You're welcome to put them in the chat box as well. I know I saw a chat box just now, but if anybody wants to put it in the chat as well.
I think the presentation was so good that there's no questions. I believe maybe one good tip as well. If you buy in a car or a house, let's say on your car you approved for a maximum of 100,000. Don't buy for 100,000 because the interest rates go up 1 or 2%, and you find yourself in financial difficulty. So perhaps that's maybe another good tip as well. But thank you so much. I don't see any hands on the chat box. Our CEO would like to ask the question.
Annelien, thank you so much for the insightful presentation. I think what's also important is your guidelines in terms of the budget is all good and well. But the reason why we've requested your assistance this morning was that we know of colleagues that are already in deep trouble. And I think it's important for them to understand that there is avenues for them to knock on the right doors to get assistance in terms of their predicament. And I think that's just a passing and a final comment that I would like to make is just to say we have accredited with you guys because of your track record. You guys are available. I'm talking on your behalf now. But you guys are available to those colleagues that are already saying, but hang on, yeah, you're talking about budgets, but my budget is already deep in the red. I need help. And you guys are there to provide that professional help and guidance through a very difficult time. So that's just a comment that I would like to make.
Thank you very much for that. Sorry, if I may ask, if you wouldn't mind just giving me permission to quickly share my screen again. Absolutely, that is what we do. And obviously, it fully depends on, what the need is. I'm going to quickly, can I confirm, can you see my screen? Okay, so I'm just going to quickly, and I'm really going to be very briefly speak about debt counseling, which is, and thank you for that opportunity, is what we do. So once, exactly as you've mentioned, you've gone through this whole process, you have made all these changes, you have done everything, but you cannot afford it. There is just no way to go. You cannot afford your living expenses. You cannot afford your debt. That is when you are termed over indebted. And that is where debt counseling comes in. So like I said, I'm a debt counselor. Been doing this since 2008. It's come into being 2007. And it brings forward what they call debt counseling or debt review. It's exactly the same thing. I firstly want to just clarify that. Debt counseling, debt review, just two different words for the same process. But debt counseling is, in essence, an administrative legal process. And the reason I say it's a legal process is because it gives you legal protection and it comes from law. Hello?
Yes.
Sorry. Oh, okay. Okay. No, my apologies. So debt counseling forms part of the National Credit Act. And the National Credit Act obviously came into being for multiple reasons, including protection of consumer rights as well as credit provider rights as well. And one of those rights that we've just had Human Rights Day, and understanding that we have multiple human rights, but one of our rights also as consumers, as credit active consumers, is having the right to debt counseling. Debt counseling was brought into being to assist consumers who are over indebted. So that is obviously the first qualifying thing, is to say, are you over indebted? In other words, can you afford the debt that you have? So point number one, we determine if you are over indebted. once that's been established, in other words, your living expenses cannot, after your living expenses, you cannot afford your minimum debt payments, that you then, as a debt counselor, will assess and say, okay, what can you contribute towards your debt? What realistically in line with your budget? And it's going to be less than what you're currently paying, obviously. We then go and renegotiate with your credit providers and say, okay, listen, instead of 5,000 Rand a month, you can afford 3,500 Rand a month. We look at your debt holistically. We look at the total profile, so everything from a home loan right through to your overdraft and everything in between. And we will then go and renegotiate on your repayment terms, your repayment amount, as well as your interest rates, where we find a solution for you that fits your circumstances and prevents you going into a debt spiral for getting more debt as opposed to getting out of debt. Because it's a legal process, we have to make it an order of court. That's to give you protection as a consumer, whereby we say, okay, we are changing the original contractual agreement, and by making it an order of court, the new repayment agreement that's come into place is now gives you the protection. In other words, that nobody can go and change their mind. So this is not a voluntary process from the credit provider side. They have to partake in it, but it is a voluntary process from the consumer side as to whether they want to go there. And then finally, when you've repaid your debt, because the whole purpose of debt review is to pay off the debt that you have, once you have repaid your debt, you get issued with a clearance certificate and you can re-enter the credit market. Now, one of the biggest misunderstandings of debt review is that you can never, ever get credit again if you've been under debt review. And that is incorrect. We have thousands of consumers who not only have had completed the process successfully, but buy houses, cars, credit cards, whatever it is that they're looking for, not long after. Because once you've completed the process, this does not leave a mark on your credit report. Your credit report at the end is cleared because your debt is paid up, and you start from scratch, and you can go and re-enter into those credit agreements. And like I say, you can buy a house, you can buy a car. We have thousands of consumers who've done that successfully. So just clearing out one of the biggest misunderstandings. But the most important thing about debt counseling, I'd say the two biggest and most important things are, firstly, you're securing your assets. It's legal protection. They cannot come and repossess your assets and take legal action against you, because that is why it's part of the National Credit Act. And secondly, it ensures that you get out of debt. The whole point of debt review is to find a manageable way to deal with the debt that you have, repay it in a more affordable manner, and honor the debt obligations you have, but in a way that fits your budget. Because most consumers do not have the intention of not wanting to pay their debt. They just cannot afford it. And this is where debt counseling comes in specifically to assist with that. The advantages for consumers, obviously, your debt is, as debt counselors, by law, that is our function, is to go and restructure your debt and your repayment terms. We prevent the legal action, as I said. In other words, they cannot now come and issue a summons or a judgment on wanting to repossess anything. And I'm talking about new legal action. Obviously, if they started that prior, that is a different conversation. But take action as quickly as possible before you get there. Your debt gets repaid. It's not, there's a beginning and an end. Because we work on repayment plans, it's an incredibly transparent process. You can see when your last payment date is on your debt. But what's beautiful about debt counseling also is if you want to pay more, in other words, say your circumstances change and 2 years from now or a year from now, you've had a significant increase and you want to pay off more, you don't have to stick to the original payment plan. You can start paying more. You just can't pay less, obviously. You retain your assets, you keep your house, you keep your car, you keep everything. You're just paying it off over a longer period of time. And most importantly, your living expenses are covered. For a lot of people, big changes, but I no longer have access to credit. And the question then goes, but what were you using the credit for? If you were using the credit to buy food, you no longer need to do that because your food has been provisioned, because we assist with your budget from the beginning, and we provision for your food, your rent, your school fees, etc. So your living expenses are covered, therefore no need for credit. I hope that answered that specific question. My apologies for not speaking on that specifically.
Annelien, if I may, just a follow-up comment. Yes. And I want to convey this message to all of our colleagues, our team. If you are in trouble, the trouble will not go away. Talk to somebody like Debt Rescue and make certain that you get the necessary backing and the necessary advice to help you through this difficult process. And the moment you start seeing that things are turning for the worse, seek help, talk about it. You're not alone, you're not the first person, and you're not the last person that are going through this difficult time. So Annelie, just 2 cents from my side.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And absolutely, I can only echo exactly what you've said. That's why I start my presentation with, we are not alone. We're all facing difficulty. For some of us, it's just interest rates, for example, on houses, cars have pushed our budgets completely out of whack. And most definitely you're not alone. But that's why the National Credit Act is so amazing in the fact that it gives you protection. But don't wait. Please do not wait, because if the legal action starts, nobody can assist. So if you see that, speak to a debt counselor. And obviously, having been in this industry for as long as I have to I have to put my disclaimer. Please pick a debt counselor who's been in the industry and knows what they're doing. Obviously, we are one of your preferred providers, but if you are shopping around, please just remember, insurance and debt is not the same thing. The cheapest is not the best in this case. I may have spoken about insurance and shopping around on that, but this is your debt. You have to repay your debt. And we find that a lot of debt counselors will come in with these amounts that are just like, how? It doesn't even make mathematical sense. Really do your homework and ask questions. Ask as much questions as you possibly can think of, and you're welcome to throw them in my direction, and I'll guide and assist as far as I possibly can. My team is incredibly experienced. And they'll also be honest enough to say to you, listen, debt review is not your solution. All you need to do is the following. Or you know what? Debt review is your solution, but it's still your decision to make at the end of the day. But absolutely don't wait until it's too late. Seek help, get information, read up about it. Our website, for example, contains tons of articles on various topics, and it clearly explains the process. But we have consultants, you log a call, we call you back at a convenient time to you. You can communicate on WhatsApp, you can communicate on email. We know most people do not want to have face-to-face discussions when it comes to debt. We realize that. Hence, we've made the process on our side completely faceless, if I want to call it that, where you do not have to have a face-to-face consultation. You can do everything digitally, but seek help and see if this is the solution potentially if you are struggling. And thank you for that.
Annelie, thank you so much for the presentation this morning. Very insightful and thought-provoking, and assistance is just one call away. So colleagues, if you need to use this service provider, it's an accredited service provider of ours, please feel free also to contact Shanae or around before Uasa. They can put you in touch, or you can access it via our website to get in touch with the team at Debt Rescue. Annelie, thank you so much, and hope you have a wonderful day further.
Thank you, and to all of you as well. And thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and colleagues, have a productive day further. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a wonderful day.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Have a safe day.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank
all.
you. Thank you all. Good morning.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.